live for Striving, and
well, good afternoon, everybody.
Very exciting. How to be a better ally in the workplace with our wonderful founding member, Michael Delaney, and our panel. So thank you very much for speaking today, and I'll head over to you, Michael, to kick off.
Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for joining. This Striving has that they put on here today to take part in that. This first session which is how to be a better ally and in the workplace. And in this, we want to cover a few things, not just how to be an ally, but how to recognize the allies that are out there and how to encourage people who might not be sure what they should even do in this space to step up. And I'm absolutely delighted because I have two of my favorite people that I've ever worked with joining me today, and people that I know are very passionate about this, both in terms of being allies themselves, but also in having experienced genuine allyship in the past. And I might actually ask them to introduce themselves because, you know, my words won't do justice to it. So perhaps I will turn first to Lauren Farrell. Lauren, can you give us a little bit of an intro into yourself and why you're here today?
Sure. I am about 20 years into my career in the tech industry and have loved every moment of it. Actually, I lie. I've loved most moments of it. There's definitely been some challenges. That was my optimism again there, Rod. I have most recently been at Salesforce for almost 10 years, which is where I met Michael, and have had a really exciting and interesting journey along the way. Why I'm here today is that I truly believe that we can be better and do better and create an environment and a workplace and a world that we can live in that it opens the door to so much more opportunity and innovation and creativity if we just be better and do better with equality and diversity and communicating as people. And so I'd really love to have a conversation today about that.
Fantastic. That sounds wonderful. And yes, I have seen you at work and seen the value that you brought to an environment, but that also others have hopefully extended to you. So I think some of your very personal experiences will really resonate with the audience. So next, also somebody that I've worked with in the past. So Rod Moynihan, will you introduce yourself to the audience and give us a bit of an insight into why you're here today?
Thanks, Michael, and Lauren, thank you as well. A little bit like Lauren, I'm north of 20 years now in the business applications transformation world. I actually worked at Salesforce with Michael way back in the day when the use of the word trailblazer was exactly that. We were battling head to head with legacy environments, like things people may remember, such as Siebel and other products like that in the market, and we were a single hub. We were a sales hub, and that's all we were, a sales cloud. There wasn't the multiple environments it is today. But that's the heritage of kind of a bit of my background. But since then, I've led and built a number of companies here in Australia, and led a number of business units in a number of large organisations. And why I'm here today, when Michael reached out to me, I guess there's two reasons I'm here today. The first is I've lived through the generational change that I've seen over 2 or 3 decades of diversity and inclusion being a core part of what organisations do. But I've also seen the challenges in how leaders deal with that. And I've also seen the challenges how people find leaders or create allyship in an organisation that's not just about process. It's actually about what you do day to day. And so I'm really eager to talk about the barriers that I've seen from a leadership standpoint. I'm eager to talk about the experiences that I've seen in when you create that environment and what it means, not just to your business, but what it means to your people and what it means to your organizational culture. And I think as I get a little bit older, I also start to learn more about what I had to learn and what I had to do to be different, because I do come from a very privileged position to start with. So eager to talk about that.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much. So for those of the audience who don't know me, my name's Michael Delaney. I am the head of people and culture at a tech startup called Prezi. I have been involved in tech as well for more than 20 years. It seems strange when you say that out loud. I've long been a passionate advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm also grateful and fortunate to be a founding member of Strivent, and I've seen some of the wonderful things that Strivent's trying to do. And all of the events that are happening this week, I think, are awesome. So, obviously listen to ours very closely, but check out all the rest that are on because I think you can all gain something really powerful from there. Why am I here? Because whilst I wish we didn't need to have International Women's Day and we didn't need to have sessions like this, the reality of the world is that, we've come a long way, but we still have a way to go. And I think this is a really wonderful opportunity in an open forum to share some insights, but also for the people in the audience. If you've got questions, if there are things that you want to, suggest, if there's topics that you want us to cover along the way, please feel free to feed them in. We've got some things that we want to cover, but I also want to make this as interactive as possible for those of you who are out there. However, to make it simple, we do have some questions that we kind of would like to run through. So maybe, Rod, because this kind of fell into a bit of what you were talking about in your introduction, right? I'll start with you. So when we talk about being an ally at work, how would you summarize that? And what do you think is, the best or at least a good way for us to describe it to people so they understand both what it means, but also how important it can be, even, in the modern world that we live in?
Yeah, I think for some people who might be joining this podcast with an inquisitive mind around what allyship is, I think it's worth just defining very quickly. In my mind, it's really about creating an environment where either underrepresented or marginalized or discriminated people don't feel that. If I just am creating an environment that supports processes that are not a strategy or a roadmap, they're actually daily habits and daily behaviors. And, for me, I think if I was to talk about why I think this is so important as a topic, is because I think there's fear on both sides of how to get this right. And when I mean both sides, there's fear if you're underrepresented or you're marginalized or you're discriminated against or you're a minority, fear of speaking out. And then there's leadership fear because from the leaders that I know, most of them don't know how to do it. They really don't. So they're fearful of how to do it and getting it wrong and creating a bad outcome when the intent might actually be to create a good outcome. So I think it's a really, really, really important topic. But I also think that at the heart of it for me is it's about lifting others as a leader and almost taking advantage of your platform that you have to ensure that it's not a process, right? And it's actually not about perfection. It's about a lifelong process of accepting you have to do this every day to grow it and make it right.
Excellent. So, Lauren, I'll throw the same question to you because you are a woman who's worked in technology sales for a long time. So technology and sales, not always perhaps / ever renowned as the most equitable workplaces to be in. So, what's your take on, the question?
So I think for me, having had the experiences I've had, especially early in my career, which were really quite negative. There were a lot of times where I felt I needed to, defend my position, prove my worth much greater, much harder, much stronger, much more obviously than anyone else in my team, which were always predominantly male teams. And I definitely didn't have someone who was an advocate for me or an ally early on in my career. So I had to go find someone to do that for myself, and maybe I'll talk about that a bit later. But so for me now, having been through that, it's being an ally is an action. It's an everyday action of constantly learning, practicing, and like Rod said, it's not going to be about perfection, but it's about learning and being okay with failing, but being apologetic and empathetic and genuine about it, and continuing to learn and seek more information, seek more education, and more insights from those who know more about not having an ally or needing an ally than I do now. And I think the goal, we want to elevate the life and work experience of underrepresented people. We want greater diversity in our workplace. We want equality for all to be able to be paid the right amount for the work that they do, and be promoted and be accepted and be given the same opportunities as anyone else. It doesn't matter whether you've got 2 legs or 1, or what the color of your skin is. That should not matter. You all have the same opportunity to do a great job in a thing that you're passionate about. And I want to keep, as I said in my introduction, I want to keep building on that and dedicating time to that, not just for me, so I have a great experience in my work and personal life, but for my kids and their kids. Right? The world, we have to get better. We have to get better. So, yeah.
Okay, excellent. And I think to summarize, and I don't mean to put words into either of your mouths, but I think one of the best points that you both raised on that is progress over perfection.
Yeah.
If we wait for things to be perfect, we'll be waiting forever. And who knows what perfect is as well, right? What's the definition of perfect? Because there's going to be different lenses that get applied to that and that have meanings. But every day we make a little step forward is a day that we're closer to perfection, however that vision looks like to people. There's a saying that a coach that I have uses, and she talks about this, like 2 millimeters. If you move forward 2 millimeters every day, and you do that day after day after day, at the end of a year, you will be so far forward than you ever thought you could be. So I think if that's one takeaway for everybody here right now to just absorb it, internalize, don't worry about being perfect. Don't worry about being right. Just take steps and take some progress, and everybody will get better for that. All right, that was excellent. This is why I got the 2 of you on, because you're really smart and you can say wonderful things that really resonate.
You sound so surprised.
No, not at all. It's always like when you hear people describe it in a way and you think, oh, wow, that's how I would have described it if I had the words. It's always wonderful, because I think sometimes we can overcomplicate this.
Absolutely.
So Lauren, I might actually turn this one to you.
Sure.
As somebody who has both been an ally, but particularly, as you mentioned early on, you didn't really experience that and you had to go out and find an ally. So how would you like those amongst us who wish to be authentic allies, how would you like us to express that, to show up, to demonstrate that, so that people out there could say, yeah, there's an ally that I can, use to help me get further forward in my role?
Sure. I guess I'll give a bit of an example and then I'll sort of talk to some of the points. I think, so for me, I had to go find an ally. And how I did that was actually kind of by accident. I went to the company I worked at the very, very beginnings of my tech career. I asked for 15 minutes of multiple leaders in the business to see if they could just share with me a bit about their career, their goals, how they've progressed through the business and what they do in the business. And at the time, my intention there was really to educate them about me, show them that, this is this, young upstart who really wanted to get out there and build a brand and wanted everyone to know who she was and potentially open up some opportunities, because I could see that all the people that were being successful in the business were men, and I had a lot of work to do to get myself noticed. But the unintentional outcome of me doing those interviews on my little foolscap notebook was that I was auditioning people to be my ally and my mentor. And I ended up finding one in a male leader, but in a very different kind of leader, someone who I would have, if I had to pick where he would sit, he would be in HR, or he would be in employee relations, or something else. He definitely wasn't what I would consider to be a typical sales leader. He wasn't a Wall Street wannabe. He was a really empathetic, genuine, authentic leader. And he, to this day, more than almost 20 years later, is still one of my closest friends and mentors and allies. And that particular leader was someone who I could go to in some of the toughest times I had, some of which were, many, many unwanted sexual advances, which I just did not have the experience to handle appropriately at 19, 20 years of age. When a senior male leader in that business actually physically assaulted me, he was someone I could go to as an advocate and a support who went through the process with me, but also as a colleague and a companion who I could run ideas by, how to do my first pay rise discussion, which as a woman, I was terrified about asking for more. How dare I ask for more? And he was fantastic. But I also recognized that the reason he was so good at it is he was an observer. He was very good at looking out and seeing what was going on around him and really taking that in and noticing things that might need change or might need adjustment or people that needed help. And that's, I think, one of the greatest gifts I ever got from him was being able to be observant and to really pay attention. And I think that's what I would ask for in people in the workplace, in showing up as an ally, and even initially just as someone who wants to learn. Notice what's going on around you. Don't just be so inward focused that you can't see that there are people who are struggling, who aren't being put up for promotions or opportunities or being overlooked because of something that they may have shared that maybe made them a little bit more vulnerable, but they should be able to share because we're humans. So I think showing up, observing, noticing those things, and then not just noticing it and moving on and going, oh, that's sad, but actually going, you know what? Tapping a person on the shoulder, even if they don't know you from a bar of soap, but saying, hey, do you want to go have a coffee? And just being open, putting yourself out there with a bit of time and the opportunity to listen, and you'll be quite surprised the outcomes of that.
Fantastic. Wow. And look, I wish I could say I was surprised at the experiences that you'd had. Unfortunately, I'm not, I mean, and I don't want to sound flippant when I say that, but like so many people go through those things. And look, it's a credit to you that you took the active steps to seek people out and to find an ally. It isn't always that easy, as we know, right? Not everybody is in an environment where they feel comfortable. Okay. So I'll turn the question to you as somebody who has been an ally. If someone was in the audience going, okay, I just don't know how to show up and be an ally. Like, I'm not sure what to do. Do I say the wrong thing? If I try this, is it going to be wrong? So what would be your advice to someone who wants to be an ally as to things that they could do to make themselves, if not like as if they've got a giant sign on their head saying, hey, I'm an ally, but even just by their actions or their words, be seen in that light?
Yeah, there's a lot to say here, Michael, because I've been on a journey with this one myself personally, right? And I think if you want to be honest with yourself, if you want to be an ally and you are a leader, my expectation is if you're a leader in a business now, you have to be an ally. But there is no exception to the rule anymore. But getting there is hard because often as leaders, we get put through our online diversity courses, our inclusion, all these courses we get asked to do, and we get a certificate at the end that says we're good at it. The reality is, again, that's great because it does bring to the front of the mind and the attention on the issue. But what I think is really, really important is, our brains take in 11 million points of data a second, right? We roughly remember 40 of those, and the rest are parked in a vault, which is unconscious. And this is where all your unconscious bias comes from, right? Because your experience, and the longer, I'm 50, right? So I've got 30 years of experience now in my unconscious vault. So I think as a leader, if you want to be ally, you have to start with I always think sort of a couple of key things. The first is that you need to kind of do some honest introspection, right? You need to realize that you own bias and you carry bias already. And as a leader, the impact of what you say and do, often you don't realize that is coming from that vault of unconscious bias and sometimes conscious bias. So I think that honest introspection means that, you have to look at the algorithms in your brain and actually be honest with yourself about what they are. And you have to be very conscious about correcting that, because the next thing is, you then need to kind of accept some humbleness about that to yourself, that like, admit I don't know, right? Admit that I get it wrong. Admit that I don't fully understand or comprehend what it's like to someone else that walk in someone else's shoes. As you said, whether or not they're in a wheelchair, whether or not they're a different color, whether or not they're female, whether or not they have no gender position, right? You actually have to realize that you don't know those life experiences, and you have to acknowledge that. And I think then beyond that, there's kind of organizational things that need to be acknowledged, and that it is a closed system, right? As much as it's getting better, I think, Michael, you said to me the other day, on the current trajectory at the moment, it's 132 years before we close the gender gap between men and women on the current trajectory. 132 years. I don't know about you, but that's unacceptable, right? And I'm sure everyone else would say that's unacceptable, because gender is not a reason for that. So going back to it, I think, you have to acknowledge and kind of be a little bit honest in your introspection to yourself, be humble acknowledgement that you don't know. And then I think the big one for me is you got to kind of tap into kind of see something, say something, right? Like if you see something, say something as a leader, because if someone's looking for an ally, they're going to look for the behavior that you demonstrate. Because as I said at the opening address, everyone's fearful. I hate to say it. There is fear in there, right? Did Lauren speak up about sexual advances when she could have? I'm betting she didn't, because there was a fear factor associated with what that meant to her reputation, what that meant to what would come of that, what it might mean to her career, what might stick after that, right? That's wrong. So see something, say something may have changed that, right, from someone who saw it and may have created that. But I also think as a leader, you've got to seek out your organization around you to support you. And that's also part of the hard piece, that you can hear organizations talk about supporting allyship and diversity, inclusion, and running all these various training workshops for leaders. But it's as we said at the opening thing, it's what happens every day. It's active, it's not passive, right? And so if we can create an environment as a leader where you acknowledge you don't know, you understand it's closed, you play a role in removing these barriers, accept that there's inequality and you want to do something about it, right? See something, say something, live those behaviors every day. The key to all of this will be that it is not a strategy. It's not a roadmap. I said it earlier. It's just not. Yeah. It's everyone playing a key enabling role every day that values people, respects people, gives appreciation to the individual, not the gender, not the color, not the disability, not whatever it might be. I think the big one as a leader for me, and I'm probably getting to the end of what you want to ask me at the end, is what I got out of this personally was I learned just as much about myself as I learned about those who I probably had stigmatized or had different opinions about, right? And it's actually quite a wonderful experience, But you have to be genuine and authentic as well. It can't be coming from a place of ticking a box. It just can't be. You've actually got to really want to do it.
Definitely.
I think Michael's having some internet issues.
Yeah. I guess one of the things I would just add to that as well, I think is, about like every day we wake up and we brush our teeth, for example, we have that habit. This is another habit we need to put into our everyday lives, but it's not necessarily a habit that is comfortable or easy, but that's okay. That's also helping us to develop as people and as humans, and that's good for us, and hopefully it'll keep our minds active, in our retirement and later stages of life. But we have to accept that it's a thing that is just going to be part of our daily routine, but still view it as a not a positive as such, but it's not a bad thing that we have to do. It's a thing that we want to strive towards and do better at, so that we can live in a much better environment and world.
Yeah. Well, if I jump on Michael's comment before about the 2 millimeters, and you gave some examples of things that before, Lauren, I mean, one of the early examples of see something, say something, and make a difference and act and live by allyship for me, I saw in an organization that I was leading at one point. We did a hell of a lot of PR work, and we did a hell of a lot of, from Salesforce, you're always at events, you're on stage, you're on panels like this. We introduced working with my head of marketing at the time, we introduced a policy that, no one in our company would sit on a panel or attend an event where there wasn't gender equality. So if I was invited to sit on a panel, if there were 4 men, I wouldn't attend.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's a great policy. I do think that would be difficult to, like, on scale. That would be difficult
But I
to
think
make.
it's the 2 millimeter bit for me, that it sends a message that, you know, we want to promote equality, we want to promote diversity, no matter what the activity is. And in the most public forum, when you're representing that organisation and that brand and point of view, we need to have that 2 millimeter movement. And you know, it's exciting to see that you know, it's the things we didn't do that actually made the difference, not the things we did do. So you know, yeah,
that's great, awesome.
Yeah,
Michael, I think you're back.
Nice. Can be heard. Sorry, my tech is glitching. My apologies. My tech is glitching badly on this end. Of course, sessions. Things don't work the way that you would. So I'm not sure if everyone can hear. One of the things for me, I think that's the most important that people can do is to educate themselves as much as possible. Because with education and learning comes understanding. And it can be very difficult to know what's going on if you haven't taken the time to research. It's just a list you raised, Rod, that was really powerful. Listen more than you speak around you. Observe the environment. If excluded, or if they're being shut down, or if they're being aware of that, suddenly you're in a position where you can actually take steps. And you know, the endless battle between conscious and unconscious bias. We know some things consciously, but there's a lot of things going on that we're not aware of in our unconscious minds. And until you stop and listen and look and see it around you, you may not even be aware of what's happening in your business. Other things you can do, and I mean, we talk about this in the pre-discussions we had, Rod, you raised a very good point about performative allyship, right? The checkbox thing, or the person who wants to be able to stand up in front of their team and look at me, I'm lying. So it's looking for an ally, also recognizing that element. You know, we're all smart enough to have a bit of actually doing something they believe in, or whether they're doing it just because if I do this, I will look good. Sometimes you can still take advantage of that because people, by trying to look good, will do good things, but you can eventually educate people and hopefully, you know, take them on that journey so that they do become what I would call. Lauren, allyship, and you gave us a very personal story of your first, you know, kind of efforts to get there. In a more broad sense, in sort of the things that you've seen through time, what are some examples of good allyship that you've observed? Because sometimes people need a living example that sort of unconceptualize, oh yeah, I'd be a good ally. Is there something you've seen through your history that you could describe to us?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that I have seen as a really good way of building trust and building an ally relationship is where people are open and honest about maybe some of their own challenges or something they've gone through, in order to sort of open up that psychological safety, or create that sense of psychological safety, so that then the people that you're sharing that with feel that they have an opening, there's a chink where they can come in and share, hey, I have this problem too, I actually need some support. It's kind of like wearing a headband with ally written on it, but in a much more subtle way. I think I have personally shared things of my own, you know, challenges or own things that I've been through, because I've noticed that there are specific issues going on around me, and I've wanted to give people the opportunity to share. So, for example, I had heard a number of people reference a person who had some mental health challenges in a previous role I was in. And that person was passed over a number of times for promotion or other opportunities because they had mental health issues because they had burnt out and, you know, needed some time out. So therefore they would not be necessarily, you know, a productive worker or the most reliable worker. However, my way of thinking was, I need to get to if I can, give that person the opportunity to share why, like, this is what's going on with them, so I can actually create some awareness around them and be a voice and an advocate for them. But I knew that was going to be difficult because they were aware that there were some perception issues around them. So what I did was share that I go see a psychologist. I just offered it up in my team meeting. By the way, on Fridays at 9:30, you're going to notice that I'm busy. And that's because every second Friday at 9:30, I go to see my psychologist, and I go in and I have a whinge about my husband and my kids. And I have a moan about my mother, and I talk about all the things that are going on in my life, but I feel great. That person is just for me. They're there to support me. They're completely unbiased. They're not judgmental. Sometimes they give me some help. Other times they just listen, and it's fabulous. If you have something, my extended team, that you would like to do that would be a great investment in your physical and mental well-being, then I encourage you to do that. And I encourage you to take a bit of time out of work time to do that, because I know when you get home, you've got your kids and your partner and your dog and all those other stresses to deal with, and you work really hard. So take that time, because I know that that's going to actually make you happier and more productive. But also, side note, I knew that would open up a window for people to come to me. And the next thing you know, I had a lot of people, including that particular individual, but way more people than I thought, coming to me with various issues and concerns because I'd been candid with them. So I think being an ally and showing up as an ally is putting yourself out there. It's taking a little bit of risk on your own, like for yourself, with your own brand or your own optics. And, maybe there's some fear for that, but you need to do it anyway. That you need to be trying to be comfortable in that state of uncomfortable, so that you can give people the opportunity to have you listen to them. And if you don't, then you're just sort of going to walk blindfolded through a situation that you don't even know is going on. And I've had lots of leaders. Most recently, I've had the most amazing leader who has been incredibly candid, not just with me, but with the broader team and publicly in many different speaking opportunities and podcasts. And that is just such an inspiration for me. But I know that has been an inspiration for many men and women of many different backgrounds across the business and across the community in general. And that gives me hope that if there are people out there, leaders who are prepared to stand up and be completely candid and then open up an opportunity for someone to come to them and say, hey, I've got this problem. You have so many great experiences. Do you think you could help me talk it through? I mean, that's such a great opportunity. So more of that, please. More standing up, being candid, and opening that little chink in the door for somebody to come through.
Okay. That's a great point that you raised, right? There's a real power in vulnerability. And Absolutely. There's an immense psychological safety that you give to people around you if you are prepared to say, hey, I'm not okay, or here's something that I saw, or here's an experience that I've had that might be relevant or beneficial to you. Even if they haven't experienced it, just the thought that you're prepared to say, yeah, I might seem like I've got it all together. Guess what? I'm just like everybody else in the world. I don't.
Yeah. I think it's really important. Being that transparent and vulnerable opens it all up. I know that, mental health crosses all barriers and all people, right? So we need to give everybody the opportunity to be open and honest. And the only way we're going to do that is if somebody leads by example, and if many lead by example. And it's great when you hear of a well-respected author or a thought leader in some category across the world, or an artist or something, speak up about their challenges about something, but being candid that, you know what, I recognize I have this issue. I'm going to work on it. I'm so grateful for the support I've received. These are the people who've helped me. Like that is so great. And I know that gives strength and encouragement and empowers people to think, okay, you know what, 2 millimeters at a time, I could do something. I've got a friend who every morning sends me a little note saying, hey, what's your win for the day? and we all have to just give each other one win that we've had for a day. And I think that is brilliant. That's just a tiny little bit of support from a friend, from an ally who knows that, you know, I might be having a hard time, but also she's getting something back in return. So that's actually quite nice.
Yeah. Outstanding. I like that. What's your win for the day? Because, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we typically think of wins as big things, but sometimes it could be just the smallest thing. Today, I woke up feeling great.
Yeah.
Today, the coffee was amazing.
Yep. Went for work, got her coffee, got home, and still started work on time. Yeah, high five. Good job. But
nice.
She's better for it mentally, you know. But I think it opens up the door for me to say, well, I haven't had a win because I'm having a really hard day, and this is the thing. So that's a really simple conversation. It starts with a positive tone, but it opens up the opportunity for somebody to say, actually, I need help. And you could have that conversation. You could have that conversation with somebody you pass in the corridor at work every day, and normally just say, hey, but actually you could say, hey, what's your win for the day? You know, maybe it is kind of cheesy, but maybe something like that could open up a dialogue with somebody who really needs somebody to talk to. You just don't know the difference that little tiny thing will make. And I love that 2 millimeter thing. That's really going to stick with me. So I think it's a bit of that. It's a 2 millimeter thing.
Excellent. I love it. So, Rod, as somebody who has been in many environments, and you've been both a senior individual contributor, but then for your last period of years, a leader, a manager, a board member, a mentor, can you give us an example or two of things that you might have done for people in an allyship sort of sense that might be an example others could try and follow?
Yeah, I just want to follow on with what Lauren said before I give those examples. Some really great narrative there, Lauren, and a couple of it all resonated with me. There were a few that surfaced more than others for me. I think the psychological safety piece is a very, very real issue now in organisations. Actually, let me get rid of think. It is a very real issue in organisations. Generationally speaking, we've probably got workers under more pressure than I've ever been in their life, personally, and that then goes into professionally, and environments that can be controlled to create psychological safety. The workplace is probably one of the easier places to control it, right? And it's not because you mandate things, but there are set levels of acceptable behaviours inside organisations where you can create more psychological safety. But in saying that, how do you do that? And I think I don't think you can ever truly get a psychologically safe environment unless you can create total authenticity or an authentic environment. And authenticity means allowing people to be themselves without threat of punishment or humiliation or whatever it might be. And so I think you really nailed it before when you talked about being authentic. I think it sounds so simple. And I often use a saying that, and it's a funny, my kids say it now, which is lovely. And I say, when you care, you act differently. You just simply do. When you care, you act differently. There's a difference to kind of doing something because you have to versus if you care. And I often use an example. It might be an extreme one. And I think care is so important because we forget what caring means. Caring is a visceral thing you're born with, right? You're just born with it. We all have it. Yeah. So how do you translate caring into your workplace and take that visceral caring? And, I often use an example that, like if you really cared about someone, if you cared about someone's birthday, you'll ring them. Or you'll do something, you'll find some time. If you don't kind of do it, yeah, sure, there might be some acts of God that got in the way, but it's just not at that level of care. So how do you translate that, right? How do you find that in everything you do with everyone you interact with? Because people know when you care, they really do. They feel it. It's the questions you ask, the eye contact you give, the availability you give, the putting down the phone, and actually, when someone really does come to you with a problem. So I think that authentic environment and caring is something that we should never ever underplay. Is probably just so important to allyship, right? And you need to show that. I'm going to give an example. It's a bit of an odd one in some ways, but it was probably one that opened my eyes to a component of allyship I really had to step up for, and I didn't have the lens for it at the time. I was working in an organisation at the time that during the same-sex marriage vote in Australia, and it was hands down. If you cared, you don't really care if it's a man on man, woman on woman, whatever it might be. Like, care is if you love someone. And so, you know, our organisation took a very, very public position on supporting the yes vote. And we were, you know, we did some fantastic things in the organisation, and, you know, we had a great time getting everyone's point of view. We're about 2 or 3 weeks into I guess, celebrating what our company's view and what we thought the collegiate view was of this. And I got an email from someone saying, "Can I meet you to talk to you about a problem I'm having?" And I said, "Sure, that's great." It was someone I didn't know. I'd actually presented at a brown bag, and I Michael, you've known me a long time. I don't try to present authentic. I just kind of what you see is what you get, and I'm kind of been approachable in my career, which is nice. And this person emailed me and said, "Can I come and see you, Rod?" And anyway, they put a meeting in my calendar, and we went to the depths of the building in a meeting room where no one would see us. It was like it was kind of covert almost. And I walked in, and this person said to me, burst into tears in front of me, and said, "I'm having a really, really hard time with my colleagues at the moment around my points of view on same-sex marriage." And I said, "Tell me some more." And it turned out this person had been raised as a staunch Christian, had very, very strong Christian beliefs. And so I respected that from the get-go. But what I sought to understand is, you know, number one, how can I help you? Number two, but what should have we done differently as a company? You know, because I kind of felt like I'd let them down because I did not listen to everyone's point of view. I listened to the point of view of the majority again, and didn't listen to the point of view of the minority. So I spent a lot of, anyway, what came of that in that conversation, I said, who else is feeling like this? And in an organization of about 300 people, there was about 60 people in the company who felt this way, who didn't have a voice. And I felt horrible about having not thought about that voice. So we corrected that. I corrected it. And we made it okay to have a different opinion. We made it okay that diversity in opinions is what we accept in our business, right? And whether or not you agree or disagree, it is about acceptance, right? It's not about agreement. And yeah, so that was a really interesting one for me because I think you've got to dig deeper sometimes as a leader to work out where you need to be an ally, because sometimes those needing that allyship don't come to you, right? And that was a really interesting one for me, and I learned a lot off that because in a lot of ways, what I thought we were doing as a company was supporting a minority. And in actual fact, we were actually creating another minority by doing it. So it's a really interesting one, right?
It's like the least obvious thing happened. Yeah. Not even, you wouldn't be looking out for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's not just the obvious. And the reason I wanted to use that is it's not just the obvious ones. And when I say obvious, we know what that is. But I think it's also, it's going deeper. It's realizing that it's not just the obvious ones that need the greatest amount of help. That mental health issue that you described and how you voice what you do, Lauren, I think that's super important that we create that environment because mental health is an enormous issue on the planet, not just in the workplace. And a workplace is just another place on the planet, whether it's home, it's whatever, it's just another place on the planet. Mental health doesn't change no matter what place you're in. And so I think that is an enormous one, I think, as a leader today that I've always had a massive radar out for. And I've been lucky enough that particularly in probably the last 15 or so years, that if anyone has had an issue, I've always felt very, very safe to come and talk to me about it. And I've talked about my issues, and we've all had them, right? Yeah, we've all had them.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, we mentioned psychological safety before. It is now definitely one of the biggest impacts in a workplace, right? So one thing I wanted to touch on we have spoken a bit about, like leaders being leaders and demonstrating that. But one thing I guess I wanted to raise with everybody is that allyship is at every level of the business, right? You don't have to be a manager to be an ally and to be an active ally. And it can be really simple things. I'll give you an example of something that I saw recently. I have a coach who has done some wonderful things, and she had delivered a program at her workplace that I thought was amazing, and I outright copied it. And with her permission, it was just like, wow, this is amazing. And it made me look wonderful. And I was explaining this program to someone, and they were going, oh, wow, this is really interesting. This is really fascinating. But they'd had the program explained by my coach previously. But because she was female, when she explained it, it wasn't listened to as well as when I explained it. And it was completely unintentional, right? The person who was displaying the less than equal kind of behavior is somebody who would consider themselves very open, very equitable, very much an ally. And I didn't notice it at the time. And then afterwards I did. And, it's in the instant. You don't always recognize it right at the time. You've got to go back to it. But everyone at every level can do this. Everyone at every level can be aware of something that's going on and take a step. And I'll give one other example, which I think we've all seen. We've all been in those meetings, right? And we know when you're in a team meeting, there's the two people who talk all the time. Mm-hmm. Every week, they're the ones with the ideas, with the thoughts. They're the ones who have said, oh, good on you, well done. And then there's always probably one or two people in the meeting who are just sitting back. They don't speak. We've seen those instances where somebody has an idea and it's ignored, and then a man has the same idea and everyone goes, oh, wow, that's incredible. So at a literal granular day-to-day level, you can do things like encourage those who might want to come forward. But the thing I would take it all the way back to is ask people what they need. Just ask them. Don't assume, because, Rod, you talked about that, right? That's a really interesting point about the different sort of side of things. You'd asked a majority what they wanted in that instance, and that's what they got. Ask everybody what they need. Because if you ask someone who you think is not being an ally and they verbalize it, sometimes that's what you need them to do. They need to hear themselves say what they're doing and say the behavior out loud to go, oh, hang on a minute. That's not what I thought it was going to be. That's not what I actually wanted it to be. So ask everyone and include everyone in these activities, because when you think about it, right, changing the day-to-day experiences of people means you have to sometimes change the culture. And the culture is an amalgam of everybody in the business. And we've worked, I'm sure, those of us in cultures that have been heavily testosterone driven, their finger guns everywhere, their high fives, let's go. It's tech bro world. We've all seen it. If you don't change that culture by changing everybody, you end up with pockets of terrible behavior that never get overcome. So sometimes you have to ask the people who are the most needing of assistance to change, as much as the people who do want to change. And I think sometimes we're afraid of that. We're afraid to ask people. We're afraid to do that because you worry, does this sound like I'm being challenging? Does this sound like I'm calling someone out? Mm-hmm. And technically, you kind of are, but you can do it in a polite way. Look, that was really interesting what you said there. This is how it came across. And we know lots of people who've said that, oh, I didn't mean that. That's not what I meant. It's like, okay, great. If that's not what you meant, let's see if we can work out a way for you to say it in a way that you do mean and that you feel safe to express that. Because we come back to safety again. We know if people don't feel safe, right? If people are being told, you must change, you must do this, you must do that, they will double down on their beliefs. They will hunker down into their biases and go, we've all heard the phrase, can't say anything anymore. Everybody's so sensitive. Oh, not like the old days, no one can take a joke. Giving people room, giving people space, giving everybody the psychological safety to come to the table, I think would go a long way towards, again, we come back to the point, shifting that needle 2 millimeters. You move it 2 millimeters. If you take a recalcitrant dinosaur who doesn't believe in all of this and move them just a little bit forward, their perspective changes. And then they'll move a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more.
On that point, I once challenged a leader who was taking a very aggressive approach to a forecast call, and the way they were answering it was, why did the customer not sign? And I won't repeat this leader's exact words, but it was very aggressive and I thought quite negative to the culture in the room. And it certainly didn't create an environment where we felt like we could explain our issues or, ask for help or seek guidance. It was creating a very closed environment where people, exactly like you said, were doubling down on, okay, I'm going to keep this to myself. This problem, I'm not going to talk about that. And certainly they're not going to give an honest, accurate forecast, are they? Because they're certainly not going to bring up any bad news. I challenged this leader, and the first time, second time, third time, he defended his position, and he came back with more aggression. And the third time I said, great, look, I'm going to put some time in your calendar and I'd really love to chat about this further. And he did not want to have that meeting. But I said we needed to have the meeting. I requested it as my leader that I really needed to have this session with him. And I just said, look, I don't know if you're aware. I think you think you're being a powerful, strong leader. I think you think you're shining a beacon ahead so that everyone can see where they're going. But what you're actually doing is you're creating a very negative environment where people don't feel like they can be honest. And that might be one scale of bad when it comes to having an accurate forecast call. But imagine all the other things below the surface that you're not hearing about and not seeing that could be driving the results, driving performance, driving behavior, driving all the things that we need to, as leaders, be completely aware of. So I think that was a hard lesson for him, and he certainly didn't like hearing it from a young female. But I do think that post that, he definitely made some attempts and slow 2 millimeter steps to be better and be more aware. And I caught him trying to catch my eye a few times. Like, he'd go to say something, he wouldn't, and then he'd sort of look at me like, okay, well, it might have been because he was scared of me, or he might have been trying to say, like, help me out or give me a bit of room in this moment to figure out how I need to go forward. And I was okay with that. I was okay with him figuring out a new way to be. This is definitely not the environment he grew up in the industry. And he was trying a new way. And I gave him credit for trying. I really did. And I was pleasantly surprised to see changes going forwards. But I just wanted to go back to one other thing you said. You don't have to be a leader to be an ally, but we are all leaders by being an ally. So you lead by being an ally. You become a leader in your own way, whether it's a little community you've created, whether it's to a mentee that needs support, whether it's to someone who you've met through some other completely different channel, and you've provided them some guidance and thought leadership that makes them think of a different way to approach things or a path forward. That makes you a leader. And so we all have the opportunity to be leaders in some way. And I think that's a wonderful thing and an exciting thing. And hence why that little new habit we're adding into the mix every day, should be seen as an opportunity for us and an opportunity to really learn and be better and create something better for the future.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a really powerful thing. So look, I could talk to you both all day. This has been amazing and wonderful. And I think for everybody listening, we haven't had a lot of comments in, but certainly I think everybody's taken something from this. But as we're near the end, and I always like to do the key takeaway model because it just makes sense, right? So if I go to each of you, I'll give you a second to think about this. One takeaway you'd like to leave the audience with today, either that they can do or that they can think about or they can, consider as they move forward. So Rod, because you were nodding there sagely, and it looks like maybe you've already thought of this, I'll throw to you first. What's one thing you'd like to give people to take away that they can do to either be a better ally or take advantage of good allyship as we move forward this year?
Yeah, I might take it from the lens of being an ally at a leadership level. And it's not to say I haven't sought out and had allies in my career, but I think be kind to yourself, number one, and acknowledge that this does take conscious change, and it does take conscious effort. And completing a DII course is great, and it alerts you. But what you do after that, and what you do to be kind to yourself, and humble acknowledgement that you don't know, and then do that honest introspection around understanding your bias and those 11 million bits a second that go into your unconscious vault, right? And then
Yep.
importantly, you'll get it wrong. That's okay. And to being a good ally actually starts with knowing you're not going to get it right, but trying is better than not trying.
Yeah.
And ingraining those behaviors that will lift others around you and create a platform for yourself and others to have a voice starts with that 2 millimeter, that first step of the 10,000 step journey. But I'll close out with something that I think's hard to do because it takes courage and it does feel kind of fearful, but see something, say something, right? Don't stand idle. Just it's not okay. It's not okay as a leader. I'm not talking about everyone. I'm saying as a leader, it's not okay. And if the organization you're in makes it okay or doesn't make it okay for you to speak up, you're probably in the wrong organization.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic. Very powerful. Lauren, what about you? One thing we can all take away.
The one thing I would say is be observant. So look outward, try and observe the things that you see. And for me, it's definitely say something, but also to do something. Make a small change or a small chink open by being vulnerable, by being brave, by being visible, so that people can let themselves in to open up to you or others that you know for help and support. But you're only going to know to do that if you're observant and you're looking outwards rather than inwards. It's a really weird time. It's a time of uncertainty. And I think during those sorts of times, society tends to get a little bit more conservative and go back to familiar things. So now more than ever, we need to look outside of ourselves and our concerns. And yes, it is a hard time, but we just need to look out for what else is going on around us so that we can open up that opportunity.
Fantastic. Look, that's been tremendous. There's a lot about this, and I've learned something from both of you today, and that's all we can ask. I think my key takeaway is progress over perfection. Don't worry about getting it all right. Just try. Do one little thing. We keep coming back to the 2 millimeters, but like one little thing, 2 millimeters forward, and everything can get better. And little bit by little bit by little bit, we won't need these calls. However, we did need them. And I do want to also thank Striven very much for giving us this opportunity to share. There's a lot going on this week, and Renee, I'll pass back to you, but certainly wanted to say thank you very much to Striven for giving us a platform to share our insights and experience. And both Rod and Lauren, thank you so much. Being brave, putting yourselves out there, it's really wonderful. And to the audience, if you've got any questions, if there's things you want to raise, feel free to approach any of us. The virtual world we live in now, you can all get in touch. I'm sure all of us would be happy to assist in any way we can. But I'll pass back to you now, Renee, and thank you to everyone for being here.
Thank you so much, Michael. On behalf of Strive, and I just want to thank you for hosting today. And Lauren and Rod, the discussion's been fantastic. I've written down lots of notes, things like 2 millimeter, mindfulness, awareness, and when you care, you act differently. So it's been a great session. This session is our second event for International Women's Day. A list of all of our events are available on this tab on LinkedIn, which I've popped in the comments, and the session will be recorded as well and sent out to the Striven audience. So thanks very much.